reviewing the context of that statement, its trajectory, and implications over the past half-century. That statement, in reality, was nothing more than a sort of buzzword, a buzz expression as a counter-manifesto. So let's see if I can reposition it in relation to the original manifesto itself, which was Negritude. The articulation of the manifesto itself was unfortunately much oversimplified, often self-contradictory, and much of its prospectus was simply unacceptable. Even Mrs. One of the originals, indeed, is considered generally to have coined the term itself, and he accepted as much later, even repudiated some of his earlier statements and claims. We met quite a few times, mostly in Martinique, revisited and debated the manifesto once or twice. I recall with Abiola Relay and also sort of French amanuensis of Mrs. French, whose very thing was to actually actualize Negritude on the stage. He was very distressed by the exceeding Frenchification of the Martinique sensibilities, especially in the arts and on theatre. The Martinique theatre companies saw theatre only from the very French and classic point of view. And Mrs. was determined to fragment it, just recompose it entirely. For him, Negritude in Martinique was like Francitude, and he found it very distressing. And that was his relay was Negritude constantly in action. However, all these preliminaries bring us to a number of yet unresolved questions. The answers to those questions, which we'll find as we go along, are every bit as discomforting as the very circumstances that provoked the questions in the first place. After the chastening lessons of Somalia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and of course Rwanda, yes, Rwanda most especially, I think it's only natural that we engage in a rigorous reconsideration of prior evaluations of those virtues that were supposed to be pressed into service as the foundation of the cultural philosophy of race recovery and repositioning, and its offshoots, and indeed precedents, that is, of Negritude. That exercise enables us at least to recall that even while locating the birth of Negritude in a precise decade, even down to its year of birth, that we demystify any claims made for its terms, for it in terms of precedent. Negritude remains a project of multiple reincarnations of the response of the black race to external impulses, negative impulses, before, but also as parent, but is Negritude as parent to other conceptualizations. Thus, the African personality, authenticity, Nomo, Muntu, the African Renaissance, Pan-Africanism, Ujamaa. Once I even encountered Afritude. That didn't last very long. Kwanzaa also is simply Negritude, great current, and of course, great big business with increasing ardor, just like Christmas for Christians. Finally, we must do more than pay lip service to the socio-cultural rallying label that is most current, that being Ubuntu. Perhaps some of you have listened to or watched Desmond Tutu waxing passionately on that bundle of African ethical practices, Ubuntu, an essence of social harmonization that is held to be distinctly African, and from whose ethical principles and authority even the project of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission is held to have emerged. can gingerly pick our way through a bewildering mosaic of incompatible entities that even lack a symbolic cohesion in their rendering, we find ourselves, and we must be candid, in a vast wilderness, not today in that paradise so ardently projected by the earliest precursors of Negritude, especially in romantic recollection. Whether it is County Collins, land of strong bronze ties, or Mirago Diop's breaths, or Phyllis Wheatley's revisionist poetry, or the sonorous lines of collective loss and longing which we find in Langston Hughes's The Negro Speaks of Rivers, one experiences in real life a severe disjunct that is near tantamount to repudiation, if not wholesome betrayal of those to whom the summited image of a continent often appears to be a resolute retreating from the peripheries of the possible African ideal, even in imagination. The resonant voice of one of the youngest of our ancestral voices, the late Maya Angelou, at her affirmative best, remains buffeted by shrapnels from the winds of African reality. I quote, "Out of the house of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide." How has this magnificent imagery fared in the active present? Where has this hope gone that aligned the Renaissance vision to such fundamental ancestral summons? Again, into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. Open the time capsule of the African continent on the global template of race relations today. The trans-Saharan and then the transatlantic slave trade with full African collaboration in both markets. An era of violent religious conversions of the indigents of the continent, demanding repudiation of their spiritual relations with phenomena. Usman Sembene, author of the anti-Negritude put-down, Negritude Nenuripa, nonetheless proceeded to make the film Chedo, a factual historical narrative of brutal conversions by Islamic overlords. That film was interdicted by Senghor out of concern that it might capture the delicate religious harmony that existed in that largely Muslim nation, Senegal, even though it was made with funds, especially because it was made with funds from the government. Christian conversion differed only in method, not in degree of violation. The same record of forced displacements, disruptions of antecedent economic practices, cultural force-feeding, the cruelties of mandatory quota returns in farm produce, and ivory on pain of severed hands, what we refer to as the Belgian model. These are crucial milestones of collective memory, whose evocation becomes a duty for any African with a conscience and a sensitivity to the taunt of history's habit of repetition. Because today, when we look around, what do we encounter? A new wave of religious stormtroopers laying claim to a divine mandate, yet again, strike at the heart of a continent, yet in recuperation from this cited dismal passage of history. Al-Shabaab, Assadin, Boko Haram, and all the other comers on the mission of so-called renewal. Picture the rampage of a Joseph Kony's revivalism, traversing Africa on the divine boots of the Lord's Resistance Army, laden with war trophies, slit noses, shaved lips, and severed hands. African humanism enjoins a hospitable face turned to strangers. Where there is no reciprocity, however, where where such intruders are resolved to recreate African humanity in their own image, it is surely time for some radical, even brutal thinking. No Senghor, no Emissioner ever heard the name Boko Haram or Daesh any more than did County Collin, Imam Baraka, Birago Diop, Etienne Leroux, Nicolas Guillen. Tierno Boka, the Muslim sage of Bandiagara in Mali, did preach against dogmatism, but not even he appeared to have predicted the Philistine affliction known as Nasruddin, his own countryman, the destroyer of the Timbuktu learning heritage, which for us is an embodiment of negritude, wisdom, race affirmation, and exemplar of the humanism that is exalted by his own religious adhesion in tune with the catechism of negritude. None of the Ifa priests of the Yoruba ever divined the advent of a monstrosity named Sani Abacha, who sometimes seemed infinitely angelic beside the sadism of Shekau and his elusive homicidal clones. The religious depredations on nations like Nigeria, Mali, Somalia, Kenya, Mauritania, and others constitute an affront to the very existential assertion of black African cultures and all their derivatives, including both the written and orally transmitted findings of humanity under whatever retention strategies, such as the traditions of the griot, for instance. Similarly, however named in aggregation, be it as negritude or whatever, responsibility to race, just in case pride of race is considered extravagant, at least responsibility to race, the natural asset of belonging, however we define it, does require an unambiguous defense of the products of the community, including the non-tangible. Naming, the very act of naming, plays, of course, an insidious role in galvanizing resistance to the untenable, and all weaponry, psychological, material, even purely theoretical, come into play, especially in the face of a potential repeat of a repudiated phase of history, from which the very concept of reparations has been tabled. As if in anticipation of the later strategies of race affirmation, which we've named earlier, with a creative framework for the recapture of minds that are already warped by either alien ideology, secular, or theocratic. Today, beyond negritude, we have to recognize that it is time to stop playing footsie with the perpetuators of the culture of disdain. The mind, however, is the ultimate destination, that fragile instrument that is catered for today, thank goodness, even by the developed agencies of human advance known as technology, spearheaded these days by that promiscuous facilitator known as internet, the virtual classroom that none of the midwives of negritude ever dreamt of in their life. Negritude in time of aggressive transformation, that is, negritude by whatever name, even where unevoked, is losing the battle for minds to atavistic forces which are enthralled to extremist, irrational, and anti-human abstractions, largely concocted from theologies. Like their forebears, they connive to resurrect the myth of an African continent as a void that requires reoccupation, preferably by violence. Imperfect was negritude, but no more so than any other secular or theocratic manifesto, ideology, or theology, some of whose claimed scriptural mandates proved to be merely time-bound, historical excursions into the field of contestation. Between what? Between power and freedom, between dogma and exploration, between dictatorship and submission. These are the continuing impositions of choice that this continent faces. None of the Negritude stalwarts could have dreamed the plague of the proliferation of child soldiers, inducted by desecration of traditional rituals into the grossest profanities of the human condition. None, I insist, could have envisaged the abduction of nearly 300 school pupils for sexual slavery in the name of any known or unknown deity. None ever dreamed of the Joseph Kony of the Lord's Resistance Army, East Africa's Christian complement of Boko Haram's Yusuf Mohammed, or the self-proliferating Shekau, all masters of youth abduction, mass infanticide. Joseph Kony still roams the forests, uncannily eluding his hunters time and time again, but constant in his dedication to Christ the Savior, in between a slicing of the lips of captives or followers considered tepid in their responses to his divine calling. Negritude has never held a knife to the throat of any of thus designated unbelievers and gloated before video cameras before the climactic decapitation. Negritude has never destroyed libraries, contemporary or ancient. On the contrary, the retrieval and preservation of the African hoard of knowledge, those material precipitates of the human imagination, has been its insistent raison d'etre. Whether achieved or not, Negritude cannot be held to impede universal enlightenment in its advocacy of community founded on ancestral wisdom, has never promulgated a jihad or a crusade in the name of any deity. So perhaps Negritude may be grasped as an aggregate or synthesis of what it is not. No matter, I'm persuaded that it is time to unfurl that very banner that does not advocate enslavement or massacres as a means to human development in its continuing quest for the exploration of phenomena and the elevation of Homo sapiens. Yes, indeed, I do agree with West Indian critic Arnold Giddens when he wrote, "The humanist tradition, which predated the coming of the Europeans to Africa, should be part of the education of contemporary blacks, wherever they might be. That may be our mission for the future." Yes, the continent's future generations do need rearming, right from infancy, so that their first words on sensing this world of ours, in between bouts of puking, do not turn out to be the mantra from that famous play, "Stop the World, I Want to Get Off." It's once again time, I believe, for inward stock-taking and repositioning of both fully embraced and gingerly approached concepts. The race armory needs to be revisited, its contents rifled, burnished, and honed to an enabling intellectual and cultural counterforce. Yes, if you wish, call it Negritude by name or any other name. If that much touted African humanism turns out to be no more than a mere feat of conjecture or desire, a collective wish fulfillment, then perhaps it is time to invent it, render it accessible and combative, affronted as we are today by remorseless forces ranged yet again against our humanity, resurrecting the lamentable history of this day. To sum up, the lessons of Makerere were not learned in Makerere. Makerere unwittingly, however, laid the foundations for the grand intellectual discourse, raised questions that events around us have begun to clarify, if not exactly resolve. Tigritude or Negritude? Well, wasn't St. God himself the great apostle of synthesis? In case nobody has noticed, the or in that polarized phrasing has long given place to and. And to any doubters, I call on the spirit of Christopher Kibo, poet and warrior, and an ideal embodiment Foundation, even during his 90th birthday celebration in Paris, albeit the effects of age and even ability to articulate intervened. But nonetheless, it was interesting. We found common ground between the two. This commemoration is, in my personal perspective, a celebration of that earliest expression of both the diversity and the harmonization across the continent of varied historic formulations and cultural actualities. In short, an argument was generated in Kampala. 55 years later, perhaps it is time to reignite it, update it, but not along the principle of polarization. On the contrary, it's an opportunity to nudge it along towards a creative harmonization. Thank you very much.